Disclaimer: please note that this episode contains depictions of violence that some people may find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the speakers, commenters, experts, and/or hosts. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect nor represent the channel's policy or the views held by this channel or broadcaster. The broadcaster or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of The Night Crew with Katie and Drew. Today we will be talking about an unsolved case, the Dyatlov Pass incident that occurred in Russia. It has been unsolved for a very long time.
Very long time.
Very long time.
We had to go in the archives for this one.
The 1950s, long time ago. So Drew's going to get started on really what happened before they were murdered, which isn't much, but we'll go into more detail on the theories later.
So, you have to remember, first things first, you have to remember this is in Russia. So, Russia's very, very cold, especially in the middle of January. Now, you're looking about 0 degree temperatures and less. So, negative degree temperatures. That means hypothermia will set in between 15 to 20 minutes, if that. And that's not even being exposed to it completely for 10 minutes straight. That's intermittently. So you're talking about getting frostbite very, very quickly. Anyways, on January 10th, 1959, 10 hikers head to Vieje, which is a little village near the mountains where they're going to be hiking, with no compass and no radio contact. Actually, excuse me, they did have a compass, I'm sorry. So they had no radio communication or equipment or anything else but a compass.
And probably a map, if even that.
If they even used a map, which I doubt because they would get wet. But anyways.
Well, even though this is the 1950s, I don't even know what else they would take with them. But except a compass, you know what I mean? I don't know what the technology's like.
They didn't have radio. I mean, they did have radio equipment back then. Yeah. It's 1959.
Yeah.
It's after World War II, so they had something. Anyways, the trip was supposed to last about 16 days. It lasted longer than that. And it was also a 200-mile hike. Now, the area that they were trekking to was mostly uninhabited besides a village. Now, this village is for the locals that were there. And we're not talking about like a little town village. We're talking about native villages.
Yeah, it was a local tribe that resided in these mountains, but that's really it, in animals. So tribe, animals, hikers, that's it.
So the victims, these 9 out of 10 victims, were all sponsored by a trip from Ural Polytechnic University. Now, these are Russian names. These are hard to pronounce and say in English. So we're going to give them nicknames so you guys can understand easier and understand people's names easier. So the first girl we got is Melia. Second guy is Rust. The third guy is Simeon. Second girl is Zen. Next guy is Nikolai. Next one's Yuri, Alexander, another Yuri, and Igor. Igor was about 23 years old. Now, with the name of the Dyatlov Pass incident, Igor's last name was Dyatlov. But all of these, classmates and hikers, they were the best of their class. To get sponsored by a university to go on a hike is insane. So these people were very experienced mountaineers, and they were respected members of the sports clubs that they got into. Now, Igor Dyatlov was the leader of the group and set out to make their hike very, very difficult. So they all become grade 3 outdoorsmen. On May 29th, 1959, they finally closed this case, and we'll get into all the meat and juice that we didn't talk about as of right now, but we're gonna give you a time frame. So these classmates went on this hike on January 10th. The case got closed May 29th. So about 4 months they were on this case?
It took them about 3 months to close the case, and then it continued to be open again and again and again, years after years, but it's still, even in 2019 when they reopened it and gave the avalanche theory, that doesn't mean the case is totally solved, basically, even though they said it was.
Yeah, this is a very famous case, not to our viewers, but for most of the world. And you can go on, history.com.
Yeah,
you can look on Google. It's on a bunch of newspapers.
Yeah, journalists.
It's a very famous case. Very famous. Anyways, the Soviet Union ended up finding all this, and they're like, yeah, we have to close this entire area off for these murders. And they came out with a public state of death. And what the cause is unknown elemental force. That's what they said. They said it was an unknown elemental force.
Yeah, for the government to say that would be a little spectacle.
That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy.
And especially with all the injuries of all the bodies being different and bizarre, especially the woman had the weirdest. It was just weird what happened to their bodies.
Speaking of the injuries, we're about to go into these injuries of every single person. The 9 out of the 10. Now, Yuri was one of the men that left earlier because he had back issues.
Yeah, so Yuri was not involved. He was a suspect in the case, but he didn't do anything.
I absolutely do not believe it was
No.
Yuri.
One man cannot do that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So, the first 2 bodies, they were found under a tree. Now, they were sitting up against their backs on this tree, looking down, their head were down, and neither of them had clothes on. They all just had their underwear on. That was it. Now, one of these men had burns on his feet, which Katie stated earlier when we were talking about it, that he wasn't too far from a burned out fire. Now, his head had many bruises and cuts on it. He had dried blood all over his face and gray foam leaking down his cheek. Now, the other man, he had scratches and cuts all over his hand, and he had blood on his face, but also he had a piece of his own flesh in his mouth, which he bit from his own hand. Now, his knuckles were all bruised and swollen, and he was also missing the tip of his nose.
So I'm thinking a piece of flesh in his mouth from his own hand. It had to have been a survival instinct, maybe? Or I just don't think that just makes, he did it himself, so it wasn't an animal, it wasn't a different person that did that.
That's the thing. What are you bringing yourself to bite your own hand and rip off a piece of flesh from it and have it still in your mouth when you're discovered?
I still think he was terrified and he was trying to, I don't know, I really think he was so terrified that he accidentally bit his own hand and didn't even realize it because he was trying to keep quiet or something. Or
was he that hungry? Did he survive for a long time enough to bite his own hand off?
Yeah, he could have been suffering starvation or hypothermia. Don't know what those hallucinations are like, but I mean, given the fact that they had no clothes on, they were obviously experiencing that. They thought they were hot. That's why they started taking off their clothes.
Well, that's a normal case of hypothermia. For example, I recently went out in the field for my job. And if you don't know, I'm in the armed forces. I'm not going to tell you what I do or where I'm at or anything like that. But I will say, I was out in the cold this winter, sleeping in a tent. And I was so cold, my body went into survival mode and put all of my blood from my limbs into the upper section of my body, so my head and my chest. And I was sweating out of my armpits, and my chest area, where all my intestines are, and my head were sweating, while my limbs, my arms and my legs were as cold as ice. Now, it felt like I was sick, but I wasn't actually sick. My body was trying to survive. I didn't know how cold I actually truly was until I felt that. I was like, holy crap, I'm actually colder than what I thought. Yeah. So when you're dealing with this, you don't actually know how truly cold you are.
Hypothermia is a horrible way to go, which I know all of them experienced that, obviously. All the bodies did. Ugh. But either way, the third body was located about a few yards away, and it was seen hugging the branch of a tree. He was laying down, hugging the tree up above him, and his nipples were bruised and cut. He had blood in his face, and he was facing towards the tent, which meant he was trying to get towards the tent, but maybe he was holding onto the tree to either hide himself or hold on in case there was an avalanche. It could be many things.
Well, that's just a weird thing to find someone dead hugging onto a tree. Like a tree trunk on the ground. That is a weird way to die. That is a weird thing to see. Normal people that doesn't happen to normal people. That's weird. That is not common at all.
That's why I think it was either an avalanche or he was trying to hide himself under the branch of the tree. Who knows? Either way, he wasn't moving, obviously, if he's hugging the tree.
Yeah.
And that's how he froze to death, pretty much.
Well, the next body that they found, it was one of the women. Now, she had bruises all over her face, a long red bruise on her side, and her fists were clenched when they found her. The thing is with me is that the long red bruise on her side. Usually when you get bruises, it's from blunt trauma, right? So when an object hits your skin and you get a bruise, it's because that object hit your limb or wherever it hits hard enough to pop the blood vessels, and then the blood comes pouring out. That's why your bruise gets dark purple, blacker, because the blood gets leaked out of your blood vessels and fills that area.
Yeah,
that's what makes me think she got hit with something so hard it left a long red bruise, and that could have been what killed her. We don't know.
And there was another theory about the bruise, but I just thought it was rigor mortis. You know, all the blood is settling on the left or right side of her body, and it's just sitting there now. And her fists were clenched on her chest. She was frozen.
Let me ask you this. With people with rigor mortis, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they're in a casket, let's say at a funeral, are they going to have a giant bruise on their body?
No, I mean, they
they
put so many chemicals in that body, and they take everything out, all the organs and everything, before they set them out. So I studied criminal justice in college, and they'd show us these pictures of rigor mortis taking place, and it usually showed there was a man was dead in his bathroom. And it was like all the blood settles if they're laying on their back, maybe their stomach.
Yeah, but that just makes does that make their skin like a little bluish purple color?
Yeah, and they get really bloated.
They get bloated, but they don't have a bruise.
Well, who knows if it was even a bruise or if it was the blood settling. I don't really know.
I think she got hit. But we'll get into the theories on what happened to these people a little bit later. But after a week of searching, they finally found a fifth body further up the slope of the mountain. Now, he had a fractured skull. He wore one sock on one of his feet, and the other one, he had a boot. Now, to me, when I was talking to Katie about it earlier, I believe this man put on a sock on his left foot and a boot on his right to keep both of his feet warm. But the thing is, with me, he had a fractured skull. They went into detail about his fractured skull, and they found bone pieces of his skull in his brain. Now, my thing is, you have to get hit so hard in your head for you to have bone pieces into your brain.
Yeah, I don't think an avalanche could do that. I really don't think so.
An avalanche could not do that.
No.
You cannot convince me of that.
That is a lot of pressure, a lot of force, and with my theory on the sock and the boot thing, I think he was just trying to get out of his tent in a hurry, so he went out there with only one shoe on because he was such in a hurry to get out before something attacked them.
Now, that could have been it too. Something might have attacked him. You know, like he was running from something and something hit him on his head and he died instantly right then and there.
Because they said on the tent, it was like they were trying to get out, because it was sliced open, the tent was, it wasn't going in, it was going out. So they were trying to get out of the tent.
See, that makes me feel like they got attacked by something.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyways, back to the story. 6 weeks later, so this is 6 weeks after this incident happened, the snow had finally melted, and the investigators, they met with a local tribe. That's what we were talking about earlier. A local tribe that lived on the mountain. They took them to a makeshift snow shelter. About 250 feet from where the first bodies were found, they found a pair of sweatpants with the leg cut clean off, and a woman's sweater with the left sleeve cut off. And after digging around the shelter some more, they found 4 more bodies. And one of them, 3 of them were 3 males, and one of them was a woman.
I think with the woman's sweater and the pant leg, so basically the pant leg was off and the sleeve on the woman's sweater was off. So I definitely think something was attacking them. I don't, unless they like ripped their clothes off.
I do believe they ripped the clothes off, maybe because someone was bleeding, or they got a cut.
Or hypothermia.
Hypothermia, ripping their clothes off. But that's weird. They only ripped off, a pant leg and, a left sleeve. That's a little abnormal. So what makes me think of that is either someone was bleeding, maybe they're trying to start a fire with their clothes, or honestly, there's so many ways that you could do with those 2 pieces of clothing. It's just abnormal.
Yeah, but I mean, they were trying to survive with that little snow shelter, because if you dig far enough underneath there and you get close to each other, you get some warmth.
Well, right, but the thing is, they found 4 bodies in the same exact spot. I think what happened is, so the first 5 people that died, I think they were running from something. I think they were trying to get away from something. I think these 4 people came together and took off, while the rest of the 5 people tried surviving against whatever they're facing. Because it's weird that they found 4 bodies in the exact same spot while the rest were spread out. I think they were fighting something or running from something, and something killed them.
Well, yeah, I think they were all running from something, and they all got separated.
And then the 4, they met up at that shelter. They lived as long as they could, and obviously they died. But the bodies at the shelter, they were close together, and it looked like a dumping ground, honestly. One of the male bodies, he had a twisted neck. Now, when we say twisted neck, it's not just like a little,
It was bad. They showed pictures of it.
It's like 360. Yeah, his neck was 360. For you to have enough strength to do that to someone, you have to be extremely strong. We're not talking about a bodybuilder. We're talking about stronger. It's almost insanely strong. Now, one of the other female that they found with these group of 3 other men at the bunker, she had a crushed rib cage, which one of the ribs had punctured her heart, and she was missing her eyes and her tongue. Now, the other male, he had a big fracture on the side of his skull, completely cracked through his skull.
It's just so weird how all the injuries are different, and
they're blunt trauma. Most of them are blunt trauma. I think they got attacked by something.
And after looking at the photos of the crime scene and watching a documentary about it on the History Channel, check that out. It's really good.
We will link a link at the bottom of our description on YouTube. If you want to find these, you can also look them up on Google. It's very simple. You can head to our YouTube, though. It will have the link in the description.
It's a 45-minute long video. Trust me, it is interesting. It is not boring.
It gives a little bit more details.
It does. But either way, they were saying all of the bodies, I mean, most of them had their eyes open and everything, but most of them looked like they were in a state of shock. Like they saw something that just scared them to death, literally. And that's something the History Channel was describing too. And I was like, that must have been something absolutely terrifying to even, because just the look at their faces after they're dead is just It's horrible.
Yeah, we saw pictures. I saw the picture of the fractured skull, and I will say it was probably the most abnormal skull fracture I've ever seen. It looked like this guy's head got caved in by a bowling ball. That's exactly what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even kidding. It was insane. But now we're going to go into some of the theories of what happened with this case. So the first theory we're going to head into, so the authorities thought it was an escaped prisoner from one of the Stalin's gulags, which was a few miles from the site of the attack. Which, if you think about it, with all the blunt trauma that half of these hikers took, it would make sense if one of the prisoners tried leaving. But here's the thing with that. If one of the prisoners was to leave that jail, they would have froze to death. Obviously, a jail isn't going to give them the resources to leave and try to survive out in the middle of a mountain when it's freezing cold.
Yeah, but not only that, I mean, I feel like if a prisoner was escaping and they saw this group of 9 people, they would want to hide, not attack all of them.
You can't fight
they're
9
escaping
people
for a
and win.
reason.
Yeah.
So,
But they also mentioned that they asked, hey, is there any prisoners missing from this gulag? And all of the authorities at that jail said they were accounted for. So it definitely was not a prisoner escaping. That's off the dish now.
mm-hmm. So the next theory is that the sole survivor, Yuri Yudin, killed his friends. This theory, no. Why would he kill
Absolutely not. I mean,
9 of his friends by himself?
You have to be a pretty talented killer for all of them to see you. He has to be so good at fighting to have all of his friends watch him kill someone right in front of them and not do anything about it. Yuri definitely wasn't. It wasn't him.
Yeah, and they said that Yuri left the group January 28th at 11 a.m. due to his back pain, like we said earlier. And his alibi was his family. He returned home to his family on February 1st and February 2nd to visit his family to heal, and that checks out because they were all murdered on February 1st.
Yep.
So it was not Yuri.
And then there's there's plenty of theories, but we're getting into the most important ones. The investigators of the case, they're like, okay, we have this local tribe called the Mansi. Now, the investigators, they traveled to the Dead Mountain, which is what it's called, which is Mansi territory, which is the local tribe that was there. And any women that are either locals or outside of being local, are not even allowed to go into the village where the tribe is located or even look in that direction. That may suggest that while a couple of the eyes have been removed of the woman, there's also a tongue missing from the same woman, and the tribe said they don't do that. But after interviewing some of the tribe members, they tell the investigators that on the night of the murders, they saw really, really bright lights in the sky. Now, coincidentally, with that statement that the tribe made, the camera of the hikers, which they had been taking photos of this hike during the entire time, they took a picture of something bright in the sky.
Yeah, so basically the picture, it literally just looks like you took a flash photo of a wall or something. It's just this white, bright light in the left-hand side of this photo. So the tribe members are like, yeah, we saw those lights. It was there's something weird going on that night. It was not us.
Now, my thing is, could that be snow? What could that be? You know what I mean? It could be snow. It could be really anything.
It was definitely nuclear weapons. That's what I think.
We'll go into more of that later, what we think it is. But after testing, this is another theory, by the way. After testing the clothing of the victims, it is revealed the high levels of radioactivity was found on these people. And a lot of them are saying it was a government cover-up.
Which I definitely think it was a government cover-up, because why did they close the case after 3 months of doing investigations when 9 people were murdered
Anyways,
violently?
we're going to get into the points on why she thinks it was a government cover-up. Now, they're asking, maybe these bright lights that night were the weapons test gone wrong. Maybe it was a Soviet government's military that killed these people as they witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. Maybe the hikers, Simon was a KGB spy. Back then, obviously, the Cold War and all that stuff was going on. And Simeon was 38 years old. He was single. He had many cryptic tattoos, served in World War II, and asked a lot of the other victims to call him Sasha. Maybe he went on the trip to stake out the Russian military. They don't know.
I mean, to be fair, this man is 38 years old, hanging out with a bunch of college students in their early 20s that doesn't even go to the university. So that's weird. It's very strange.
Now, the lead investigator on the case, he was looking at all the equipment that these hikers brought. And he noticed, hey, most of this equipment that we found on these hikers, it does not belong to them. They've never even purchased this stuff that was found on them.
Yeah, they even found an extra pair of skis. And they're like, this was definitely staged.
Which is weird.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Or maybe one of them brought it in their case, hey, if this ski goes wrong, I have an extra pair of skis, to go down the slope. I mean, you're going up a mountain, right? You're always going to want extra equipment, extra stuff to help you through.
An extra pair of skis would be very heavy to carry, I feel like, for one person to carry.
Well, maybe they split it up. You don't know. You know what I mean?
Either way, it's
Anyways,
just weird.
On one of the cameras that they found a picture of an unusual creature, and they did photothesis on the picture, and they noticed that if the picture was taken in real life, which it was, but if you compared it to a person, the creature would have been 10 feet tall. And most people, when they looked at the picture, they believe it was a Yeti.
Yeah.
Now, I personally believe a Yeti did all of this. Now, it sounds stupid until you get into the deep wishes of it, right? So, in North America, we have stories of Bigfoot all the time. Now, there are some hair follicles they found of Bigfoot and some, footprints in the soil, and they plastered it in poop. Yeah. They have plenty of evidence that Bigfoots exist. Now, whether you believe it or not, that's up to you. But they actually have the picture of this Yeti.
Yeah, and this is tall, dark. You can tell it's a hairy creature.
And it was black and brown colored fur. Now, this thing easily would have been able to survive up in those mountains.
Yeah, it's got a lot of hair, and honestly.
But you could say it could have been wild dogs, bears, wolves, Siberian tigers. But bears were in hibernation that year. Around that time of that year.
They did say, bears were in hibernation, but if one of them woke up, they could be very hungry, and that's why they attacked the people.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
You would see bear claw marks on these people. You haven't seen one on any of these people.
I feel like a bear would tear up these bodies. None of them were tore up like that. Mm-hmm. They just had, I'm not going to say
the bear would have eaten some of the people. They would have eaten them.
Yeah, there would have been bigger scratch marks, and these people, the tip of your nose is missing, your eyes are missing, the tongue is missing. That's very small details.
And you know what makes me think that is something intelligent or something that killed with brute force, i.e. a Yeti, do something like that. You know how strong you have to be to rip out someone's tongue and their eyes without any tools? You have to be insanely strong. Now, to me, two fractured skulls, their bones in their brain and such, a Yeti could do that. A Yeti could rip out someone's tongue. A Yeti could rip out someone's eyes.
And the weird part about this is this group of 10 hikers, basically 10, they made this article before they went on this trip, making it a satirical article about Yetis and the legend behind it and just making fun of it. I find that so weird that they took that picture too when they were joking about it before they went on this hike and how precautious they were.
That's very weird. I think, this is my theory, I think they got wind of a Yeti sighting near this mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe from the tribe members who told the story to a guy who moved to the village where they were staying at, whatever. Somehow they got the story of there was a Yeti in the area and they wanted to see it. They wanted to get proof of it. And then everything else happened because they actually saw the Yeti, took a picture of it, which they have. It's real. You can look it up on Google.
Yeah, even the History Channel says
Even the
it's
History
real.
Channel has, and they say it's real.
Yep.
And I think they really did get attacked by a Yeti. I absolutely do. With every being in my body, I think that's what happened.
I have a different theory, but I'll get to that in a little bit because we're about to cover it.
But I guess you could say there are other theories where the hikers could have been killed by an avalanche. So on February 1st, 1959, the winds of the mountain were up to 65 miles an hour. It was about 30 degrees outside. I mean, essentially, this theory closed the case, but many prosecutors, many investigators rejected it.
Yeah, so the avalanche theory is the most recent theory they tested. It began in 2019 and went to 2021 when they actually tested it. Basically, they were trying to figure out there's a certain height of a slope there needs to be for an avalanche to hit you, and they were at like 28 degrees, I believe. An avalanche can hit you at 30 degrees, and the people were saying, well, 28 degrees is close to 30, but it's unlikely that there was an avalanche. There's so much science that goes into avalanches. But either way, in 2020, the new prosecutor that took on this case gave the public this avalanche theory, which ultimately closed the case. But I do not believe the avalanche theory.
So in 2020, this prosecutor, he goes to say this area that they were staying in, the winds can reach up to 190 miles per hour. Now, the prosecutor stated that a small avalanche could have landed on their tent, which is what led them to cut the tent open to get out of the tent. And then after a expected bigger avalanche didn't come, they lost sight of their tent and they experienced hypothermia and they died. Now, they said that the last 4 hikers dug a makeshift snow shelter, which I understand, to preserve body heat. But the thing is, how do you explain the blunt trauma? Like, how do you explain someone's tongue and eyes getting ripped out?
Yeah.
Anyways, they said that during this makeshift shelter that these 4 hikers dug, it collapsed on them while they're sleeping and they died.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the avalanche theory. That is the most recent theory they have that closed the case. But I want to hear your theory, and then I'll give my theory.
So, like I said, I do believe Yeti did this. And it's not because of, I'm saying, I want to believe in the Yeti, or like, etc., right? These people had blunt force trauma to their skulls that only a baseball bat could do to these people. And you have to hit them not just once, more than 3 or 4 times. They found skull fragments in these people's brains. Their tongues ripped out and their eyes ripped out. There's nothing else on earth. No wolves, no bears, nothing like that could have done this cleanly, I guess you could say. If it was a wolf, they would have eaten the bodies. At least some of the bodies. Mm-hmm. You would have had teeth marks, etc. That's a no-go. If it was a bear, they would have found claw marks, etc. That's a no-go. Bears don't just rip out people's tongues and eyes and just eat them.
Yeah,
that's very abnormal for bears.
They didn't even talk about any animal bite marks or anything found on the bodies either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the other part of me wants to think it was the people. Maybe they went crazy enough from hypothermia. They're like, hey, I want to fucking eat you because I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
Or maybe I want to rip your eyeballs out and have them as a snack. Whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But again, you have to be super strong to rip out someone's tongue, eyes, and cause that much blunt trauma.
Or twist their neck or crush their skull.
Yeah, and then from there, how do you explain the picture of the Yeti? How do you explain that? That's a real picture. It actually happened. I truly think it was the Yeti. I do. They have all the evidence there that it was. Maybe that guy bit his hand because he was freaking out that he saw a Yeti. You know, maybe he bit his hand because he was in so much pain and he was so scared that he was looking at a Yeti beat the shit out of the hikers, his classmates, his friends. Maybe the guy got his nose ripped off because a Yeti ripped it off.
I think that was from hypothermia, though, the nose thing.
And these people's knuckles with all the scratches, maybe they're fighting back against the thing. I think it was the hiker, or the Yeti. I truly think it was the Yeti. It has more than enough evidence to say it was the Yeti. But that's for you to decide. Now on Katie's theory.
My theory. There was radioactive material found on their clothes. Nothing can explain that except testing nuclear weapons. So I believe hikers were hiking. They went into this unknown test area, not knowing what they were getting into, and these nuclear weapons were shot up into the sky, and that's how they got the radioactivity on them, and they landed too.
Here's the thing. You're talking about nuclear weapons here. If it was a nuclear weapon that got launched at them, they would have died instantly right away as soon as it hit the ground.
Maybe they did.
Okay, but they would have been fried. The radioactivity on their clothes wouldn't have killed them. Like, their skin would have been burned. All that snow on that mountain would have melted.
No, I mean, like, it was flying up in the sky.
You can't get radioactivity that fast from a missile flying over you.
Yeah, but how do you get radioactive material on your clothes?
I don't know.
Either way, I think the government was using this as a cover-up for testing nuclear weapons or testing some unknown weapon. Who knows? You know, either way.
I mean, you have to do something so detrimental for radioactivity to be on you. You have to basically sit next to a nuclear reactor for it to transfer over to your body.
Maybe they were really close to the test site, and that's how it got on them. Because, I mean, Chernobyl, that spread, all that radioactivity spread.
But over time, and it got worse over time. It wasn't just instant, you know what I mean?
Either way, I think they were testing nuclear weapons in this area, which activated the avalanche because you got those, sound waves or whatever from these weapons, sending all these waves to the snow.
Concussive waves.
Yeah. Causing this avalanche. After the avalanche, the military could have eliminated any survivors, and animals could have injured the hikers' bodies, pretty much. But when I'm thinking, like I said, I think this is a government cover-up. I really do. And, I mean, you never know what they will do to these people if they survived knowing what the government is hiding from them.
Or, can I put another theory out there?
Yeah.
Or maybe they actually had some sort of facility where there was nuclear stuff going on. They were testing it on some sort of animals or something. Maybe they caught a Bigfoot or a Yeti. And it escaped because an explosion happened where they got their radioactive from.
Mm-hmm.
And that Yeti found them, killed them. You know what I mean? It could be thrown up in the air. Any theory that you have is something.
But
it can never be disproved.
I will say, with Chernobyl and the radioactivity, doesn't that, mess with your mind too, though? I mean...
No, I mean, you die too fast for it to even... it'll hurt... I can't explain it. Radioactivity is something that you cannot see.
Oh, yeah.
And, for example, in Chernobyl, right, when that whole thing happened and some guy tried to reach for a door handle, his hand melted off. His skin melted.
I would say it melt off.
You would die too fast for you to even consciously think of what's happening to you.
Well,
if it's that powerful of a radioactive material or weapon.
Yeah, because I mean, the only thing with my theory, the prosecutor that opened up the case again in 2020 he did reports and he told the public that there was no nuclear testing or weapon testing the night of February 1st, 1959, but a lot of people believed he didn't even look into it. So there's so many different theories. I mean, it literally could have been anything. It could have been something, like Drew said, aliens, Yeti, weird animal.
No, I mean,
something.
do you think it could have been aliens? Because aliens would have given off that radioactivity. But then, how does that explain the Yeti picture? How does that explain the white light picture?
How does that explain their injuries? Their injuries are just so weird. I don't understand if a human did that or some weird creature did it.
I just don't think a human could do that much damage to a person. They'd have to repeatedly punch them and hit them, and then at that point, that much blunt force, you could be able to tell it was a human. A human cannot rip out someone's tongue or their eyes with just their hands. I'd say that's nearly impossible.
Yeah, because I mean, that's why they thought the tribe did it.
Without using tools, I think just pulling on it would be impossible. Now I could be wrong. I'm not obviously a scientist or anything like that, but from my experience in combat and such like that, I don't think it's possible.
Well, just the fact there was no weapons found either. There's barely any blood even on the crime scene. Well, it did snow, so I guess that would cover it up.
Yeah, but wouldn't the snow be melted by the blood and then it would refreeze? So wouldn't they have blood still there?
Yeah, and I mean, eventually the snow did melt, and they didn't see anything about blood. They just talked about testing their clothes, because apparently the clothes that they were wearing were someone else's clothes. I forgot to talk about that.
That is weird. What?
It was weird. This whole case is so strange. It's like a setup. Someone planned this. Something planned this.
Maybe it's not a setup, but like something definitely happened on that mountain that is extremely abnormal. It doesn't happen to any normal person that's ever lived in the United States. It's not normal.
It's just like space or the ocean. You don't know what is down there or up there. You really don't.
Well, right, but I mean, you're on the top of a mountain where it's freaking freezing.
Yeah.
Freezing. Hypothermia, I can understand. That's completely understandable. I get that. But how do you explain the blunt trauma? The pictures. The ripped out tongue and the eyes.
The chewed off hand.
The long bruise. The chewed off hand.
Yeah.
How do you explain all of these? How do you explain the extra set of skis?
Or the different clothes that weren't even theirs.
Or the different clothes that they were wearing that weren't even theirs. The tribe saying, "Hey, we saw a bunch of bright lights in the sky that night, but we didn't even know these people were here on this mountain."
It was definitely something out of this world, just like our podcast.
Make sure you follow the Night Crew.
But anyways, we will see you next week, and maybe we should talk about Chernobyl, because that is also a very interesting case about radioactivity and everything.
Yeah.
But let us know what you want us to discuss. We already got someone that reached out with an unsolved case, so let us know.
So we will be covering that case next week. Thank you for all the support that we have been getting on our episodes. I know it's not the best, but we are getting there. We are getting better. We're also working day and night, as we are the Night Crew.
This is a hobby. Unpaid hobby.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Let us know your theories in the comments. Thank you, and have a good night. So, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at The Night Crew. That is capital T, and then HE, capital NITE, capital KREW. That is The Night Crew. Thank you guys. We really appreciate all of your help and all of your support. And we will see you next week. Thank you.